Almost 2 years ago from the time of this recording, I had a prep center that stole $20,000 worth of inventory from me and my business and sent it in to their own Amazon account. So I have gone through many ups and downs with prep centers throughout the years and building my Amazon business since December of 2015. And I finally found a prep center that I'm excited to be able to talk with you about and bring to this channel. Now, this prep center is called Encore Business Group, and you can actually check them out at askjimmysmith.com/encore. I've worked with them for a while now, and I've known the owner. His name is Ryan Walsh. I've known him for a couple years at this point, and we work on different projects together from time to time. But he and his company has done an amazing job, not just with me, but with so many other people that I've sent to him. And so I wanted to bring him to this channel to answer some of the most common questions that I get for when should a seller start with a prep center, and what should you look for in a prep center, and what's the difference between a sales tax free state and a non-sales tax free state, and the implications of all of that, and so much more. And so I'm excited to bring him to this channel in this interview to go through all of those important questions. Now, if you're somebody that is doing your own prep and ship and you are looking for some more information about starting your own prep center, you can also head over to askjimmysmith.com/prep network. And if you're looking for discounted supplies on poly bags and other prep and ship products, you can head over to supplylegends.com. That is a company that I own with another business partner of mine, but we want to make sure to provide high quality poly bags and prep supplies at a discount for you. So we've gone ahead and done that at that website. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this interview with Ryan Walsh from Encore Business Group at askjimmysmith.com/encore. Hey, Ryan, thanks so much for joining me on the channel today, man. Excited to have you here.
Yeah, I appreciate having me join you here. It's nice to be on your channel. I follow a lot of the content and
Thanks.
enjoy it. So hopefully we'll give some good content to folks here.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've done any videos on prep or prep centers, and you're the foremost expert at this point that I know in the space. And I've known you for a couple years through the My Silent Team community and the Business Building Legends community, and so it's great to have you on here. So give us a little bit of a background, I guess, of your e-commerce background and how you got into setting up a prep center, and then we can jump into some questions that I know you probably need to answer for people considering prep centers.
Sure, happy to answer any questions. Yeah, I appreciate you calling me the foremost expert. I don't know that I feel that way, but you do want somebody that's going to be constantly learning too, because all these businesses change, and so having a prep center that's going to learn and grow and develop with you is a good thing. And we try to be very amenable to people. But yeah, so as far as my e-commerce journey goes, I've been in the e-commerce space for probably close to 15 years, somewhat officially. I started in eBay. I specialized in mainly sports memorabilia. I kind of turned from a hobbyist to a dealer and realized kind of the market for dealing sports memorabilia and the value of the expertise there. So I sold a lot of that. I ended up writing a book as a result and doing all of that. And then around COVID, I decided, okay, I'm kind of highly leveraged in a field where this is a pure hobby thing. This is not anything that anybody needs. They may feel they need it, but it's nothing. It's not like groceries. It's not like gas. It's not a need for people. So I didn't feel good about us heading into COVID with me being into a selective category. So I joined the Jim Cockrum coaching program. I'd had the Proven course for a while. I had Larry and Sue Pruitt on as my coaches, who I think have been on the channel here, and I'm good friends with them now. And they kind of got me into the Amazon side. I ramped up fairly quickly. I was doing 10,000 a month in sales by like month 3 or 4, I think, in the coaching program. So ramped up quickly, got to 100,000 that first year, and then kind of kept growing and developing that. The funny part was that I was totally wrong, for somebody that's written a book about sports memorabilia, about where that market was going, because that market kind of grew at the same time. And so that multiplied like by a ways, kind of like Amazon did during COVID timeframe. So values were going way up, the demand was going up. And so then I kind of felt like I had one leg straddling each, and then I was gradually doing the splits, and I'm not that flexible. So I ended up doing a little bit of both, and then trying to figure out what to do. Then my Amazon store, as I was expanding, got shut down for a little bit. I thankfully got it back up, took several appeals, wasn't anything that held up, but that slowed me down on the Amazon side. In that time frame, I was consulting with my cousin who owned a business here that did a lot of kitting as far as manufacturing. We have a lot of car related contracts and things here being in Michigan. So car and furniture are very common categories here. So he had a kitting related business that he wanted to move into e-commerce because the manufacturing element was downsizing during COVID. Obviously, there are so many sentences that start, well, COVID happened, and then so
Yeah.
that's a big part of the story. But that was happening at the same time. So when my store was closed down, I was helping him convert into more of an e-commerce oriented operation. And then my store got back up and running. I had all of these things going at the same time. And then the opportunity presented itself to buy out his existing business partner that was in for the manufacturing side, but didn't want to do the e-commerce side. And then we kind of made Encore Business Group as a combination of our two strengths. So he's very strong at logistics and warehousing and kitting, which are all key elements to the prep process. And then I brought the finance, experienced Amazon seller elements into that business. And then we basically have just kind of grown and developed it since then. When I bought in a few years ago, that was a 5,000 square foot warehouse. Now we're up to 18. We have major contracts with Fortune 1000 companies, but we still try to take on small sellers too, because we still really like that. We like growing and developing and consulting with sellers as well. So that's kind of the not so short summary, but short-ish.
Well, no, I love that because it all intertwines, it all connects, and those are all important elements, right? I mean, you started out with the sports memorabilia stuff, which, by the way, what was the name of that book? If anybody's interested in checking that out.
I do actually have a copy in front of me. I didn't know this isn't a
Okay.
plant. I do just have to have it in front of me, but
Okay.
it's an introduction to sports memorabilia.
Awesome.
It was just more of a passion project. There's a lot of kind of like what you're doing with your channel.
Mhm.
There's a lot of information deficiency in an era where we have access to more information than we ever have.
Yeah.
And so that's how I felt about sports memorabilia in general. I might go further down that path. I have a sports radio show now that kind of feeds that side, but I might go into that more because sports memorabilia, the information is very tightly held. We're both in the Jim Cockrum proven community, and one of his popular phrases is he wants it to be candlelight versus cake. They are very cake oriented. They are very, I have to have my piece. I cannot share information. And so I've actually gotten a little bit of brushback for putting the types of information out there that I did, because there are sellers and dealers that say, well, this will affect my business and more people knowing this. Well, yeah, you won't be able to take advantage of them anymore. And we don't want that. And the same way on the prep side of things, we try to, deal obviously very honestly and make sure to help everybody grow, because the businesses are best when you can have aligned incentives. That's one reason I like having a prep center, because our incentives are very aligned with all of our clients and partners and customers, because if their business grows, we grow.
Yeah.
And so we want to do everything we can to facilitate that.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, and it's an important thing for people to realize too. I mean, a lot of times I see new people get into selling on Amazon, and maybe they have a rough go of it, and they've learned a lot, and maybe they spend a year or so and they just shut it down and they give up on that. They think e-commerce doesn't work, but that's not the case. What is the case is that you've learned a lot. So maybe you just didn't like the type of selling you were doing, but there's so many other opportunities that you can pivot with the knowledge that you've acquired over that time. And even for people that are succeeding, there's a lot of other opportunities you can start to do to build multiple streams of income, as I've done and so many other people have done. So I love that that's kind of part of your story, is you've got a lot of almost in some cases, the sports side is just a completely separate niche, but you've been able to combine it with eBay, and then you learned more on, the Amazon side, and so you've just had a nice weaving effect of all these different models. And so It's been great. Now, I would have mentioned this at the beginning in the intro. Now, I record that a little bit separately for anybody that wants to know kind of how this is all made. But I want to be sure that everybody knows that I actually use your prep center for my own business. And so that was one of the reasons that I wanted to bring you on is because, you've done such a great job for me. You've also, not just for me, but for the people I've referred to you in the past, people love working with you, love working with Encore. So I'm curious, because the prep center landscape is so vast, what are some recommendations that you have that sellers should be looking for in a prep center? I have some red flags, so to speak, or some things that I would avoid, but I'm curious on your end what you think that should be.
Yeah, it's a good question and definitely something that needs to be evaluated. I appreciate all the kind words there because yeah, we appreciate partnering up with you and the Legends community. We have a lot of people in there, and I'm in and out of there with content as well, and that's a great community for probably a lot of listeners of the podcast and YouTube channel. But I think there's some unique things, and then there's some basic things. I think kind of the starting point for me is, and this is going to sound like I'm just trying to drive the price up as a business owner, but it's the first thing would be that it's not all about price. I don't want people to race to the bottom with price, because those things correlate somewhat. We try to keep our prices very even. We have intentionally not increased them for the last couple years here, even as expenses and things are going up, because we do want to stay consistent. And I am passionate about that part that I said earlier, that like we have to be aware as a prep center that our prices affect the general margins. And so we need to make sure that it's a margin that works for the business so that it can expand. And concurrently, from the other side, the seller has to be aware that, yes, you're adding that expense in by outsourcing something to us, but that you cover this subject, I think, honestly, I'm not just saying this, better than anybody that I've ever seen, of time and value of time, and how you basically say, like, if I can outsource this and I can do a task that makes me $50 an hour and then pay less than that to somebody for that, then I'm making that money back. That's basically what we try to impress upon people. So that's I'll go more into kind of that calculation probably later, but that's a big part. And then I think to me, the biggest thing is service and being able to access the people there. I've heard a lot of stories. We've attended several conferences, and we get a lot of stories. That's my least favorite part of the conferences, when we meet people. I love meeting people, but I don't like hearing all the horror stories that they have, because honestly, as a prep center owner, half of them I'm like, I don't know how this even happens. Like this is basic stuff. This shouldn't happen. Like losing large amounts of inventory, falling out of communication for weeks at a time. That stuff is just purely unacceptable. Mm-hmm. And so, like, for our operation, me and my business partner Josh both, we give out our cell phones. We probably respond almost too much. I work a lot of weekends, and we are open. Not that we, want to talk to people or bother them during the weekends, but we want to be available to our customers. And that's a key to us. So I think understanding that level of service and partnership, then that way you can understand that a little bit better. I think a big part of that partnership too is understanding what your prep center can do, because like you said, I think you summarized that well earlier, Jimmy, that we all grow and develop as people, and should hopefully do that in the Amazon space, e-commerce space, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And so as your business does that, and as your business evolves, you need to have a prep center that not only meets you where you are at the time, but meets you where you are down the timeline as well. Mm-hmm. So we have rarely had to turn anybody down for lack of offering that service. We have obviously the basic stuff, Amazon Prep and Walmart Prep, and getting into whatever other prep platforms there are. Then we do all the direct-to-consumer fulfilled by merchant stuff that needs to happen. Amazon, Walmart, 150 other platforms, and including Shopify and all that through our warehouse management system. We also can process things that don't necessarily fit on those platforms through our eBay store, and do a lot of wholesale. There I don't know of a lot of prep centers that do all of that. If they do all of those things, they then usually cut people off and say, okay, I'm not going to do it if you have less than this a month. We try not to do that. So I think understanding that, hey, there might be some appeal to a sales tax free prep center, which I know we'll probably get into at some point in the call. There are advantages to it, and I'll try to highlight the advantages and disadvantages. But oftentimes, prep centers like that and other prep centers don't necessarily have the variety of offerings that other ones do. Because honestly, being a prep center in a non-sales tax state, we have to get a little bit or sales tax free state, I should say. We have to get a little bit more creative. We have to have more offerings. We have to make sure our service is higher, those kinds of things. So the other thing I'd be curious about I'm sure you've said them on the channel some, but curious about some of your ones that you have, Jimmy. But the last one for me would be, I would ask about how much attrition the prep center has, because I think that's a good indicator. We have very little attrition. We don't have people that stop working with us because of a problem. We have literally never had a customer stop working with us because of a problem. The only ones that have stopped have no longer been doing that type of business, but we've also had those customers sometimes come back and they say, hey, we got a new Amazon business, we got a new e-commerce business, and we knew you were the one to go to. So I think attrition is a good indication of, hey, are you able to handle this customer load? Are you able to meet all of the customers' demands? That's the true test. If you're not losing customers, then that should mean that you will be pretty good at retaining a new one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with all of those points that you mentioned. Now, from a standpoint of a prep center, I've had horror stories as well, right? Before I ever switched to you, I had one prep center that stole $20,000 of inventory and just ghosted me. They never responded to anything, and they actually accidentally sent it into their own Amazon account. And
Oh
once we
boy.
found that out, we were like, hey, what happened to this? They just never responded. So, and it wasn't worth the legal fees and that whole process. So those types of things can happen if you pick the wrong prep center. And for me, that was actually a prep center that was a huge Amazon seller that just wanted to start doing some prep work. And it was somebody I didn't know, but I was introduced to. And I think one of the red flags is if they don't currently have a process in place right now for that, or they don't have the right guidance, or you don't actually know these people well enough, then starting out with a prep center like that is going to be a red flag in some cases. But also, as I look at all the different prep centers that I've worked with, I think pricing model is very important for arbitrage sellers and wholesale sellers, knowing upfront what the fees are going to look like, because some prep centers have it so confusing. They set it up for every little thing as a fee. And I believe Encore's has been very simple to understand. Even if there are fees for certain things, I still understand what my profitability is going to look like in the long term. I've worked with another pep center. I didn't realize, I was going to get charged monthly just for being a client. And, it's just something that they charged me, no matter how much I sent them, they would charge an extra fee. So understanding of fees is important. And then additionally, with any prep center that somebody's selecting, I think that they need to have a discussion with them, whether it's through email or a phone call or a Zoom call. Email's totally fine, but you just have to make sure that they're responsive. And that is probably the number one factor for me, is if a prep center can be responsive quickly whenever I'm reaching out about sales, about being a new client of theirs, then at least they care enough to respond. Most of the time, if there's a communication issue on the front end, there's going to be way more communication issues on the back end of actually working with them. And so you guys have always been very communicative with me and everyone else that I at least have talked to about using your services. And so I love that. Those are kind of the main things that I would look for, is just the communication, the pricing aspect, and like you mentioned, those other factors of, can they work with you long term? Do they fit your model and what you're hoping to achieve?
Yeah, those are all good ones. The pricing model, I think, is a good point, because I'm seeing some evolution in that. In the prep side of things, we try to follow industry pricing, not necessarily like keeping up with it, but making sure that we're competitive, and also seeing the pricing models, because that's something that kind of confuses me, even being in the prep center business, when you have, because some people like kind of that, they call it granular pricing, where it's like, okay, every time I do a single action, I put it in a poly bag, I label it, I construct a box, I fold the box closed, they'll have fees for that.
Mhm.
I don't like that because, one, they're not done at the same iteration. So
Mhm.
that's hard to predict from a customer standpoint. If you're going, okay, well, okay, so how many boxes are you going to make with my stuff? How many poly bags do I actually need, or do they just need to be labeled? So we try to have pretty transparent pricing. The only additional things are things that we don't want to charge our customers and partners for, and include that in the pricing, because it doesn't necessarily have to happen very often. We include boxes, poly bags, labeling, all of that in our basic services. We don't want people to have to pay for that. And it's just like, okay, is it fragile? Are we going to have to take the extra step and wrap it with bubble wrap? That
Yeah.
adds time and money to the process, so we've got to charge for that.
Mhm.
Shoes are more expensive, things like that.
Right.
But other than that, we just try to make that pricing clear. That's an additional pricing. We have staggered pricing too. I think that's an important thing to look for, that you're obviously a very high volume seller, and as you grow up and grow in the business and add more things in, you want to make sure that your prices can go down, because if you're sending 1,000 of the same thing to us, it's not the same process. It's not as time consuming as doing arbitrage, that it's 100 different items and having to pack it all together. So that doing that 1,000 uh, units of one item is cheaper, and you should be able to address that. But yeah, that's crazy. I forgot you had told me that before about the about the lost merchandise. But I don't. Yeah, I would be so emphatic about chasing somebody down if there was ever because we've had similar issues where, like, people have left things with us, and then they just, like, they go away. We don't hear from them. I email them, call them, whatever.
Yeah.
And if that happens, if we end up selling the items, I keep track of all that. And we've had people come back, and I'll say, like, hey, I finally got a hold of you. We've been selling your items on eBay, but we want to give you your portion. We'll treat it as a consignment, because we do handle eBay things on consignment as well.
Yeah.
And we'll give you your money out of that, because that's the fair way of doing things. The finance person in me would not let me take that money. It just wouldn't
Right.
work.
Yeah, and I think partially it was accidental, is my guess. I don't think it was intentional. But once it was discovered, they just completely would not respond. So it's it is what it is. They actually had a very large Amazon business, and so it was kind of surprising. But I think because they had so much Amazon business coming through on their end, and they were just starting up some of the prep center side, it just got mixed in with their stuff. And then once they realized it was $20,000 of stuff that they accidentally sent out, that's when it became a problem. So anyway, beyond that, that wasn't the focus of the video here, but I do have a couple questions for you. You mentioned the sales tax free state. Now, Michigan, where you're located, is not a sales tax free state. You do have to pay sales tax. I do want to also discuss, if somebody's doing wholesale, shouldn't be an issue at all anyway, right? But if you're doing arbitrage, this is where it can really come into play. And so, what's your viewpoint on using a prep center in a sales tax free state versus a prep center in a non-sales tax free state? And why is that even a consideration for people that may not know?
It's a good question, and I think it involves kind of knowing your numbers as a whole, because that's I'm going to get a little technical in some of the numbers. We'll preface all this by saying, because you say it in a lot of your videos too when you talk about finances, neither of us are accountants. I studied in
Yeah.
finance in college. I think I was 4 courses short, but I'm not a practicing accountant. But we do use the same accountant. We use Cindy Smith, Jimmy's mom, as
Yeah.
our accountant, and she is a great accountant, and she has taught me a lot of these things. And she's also a resource for our customers as well, because it's a complicated subject matter. I think a lot of people boil it down to something simple, but I want to get a little bit more layered with the topic, because basically what it is, and Jimmy said it correctly. A lot of times people will say tax free, because that's summarized, but it's not tax free, it's sales tax free. And there's a lot of other taxes that have implications in your total tax nexus. You have the income tax piece, you have other effects that you're going to want to know, and that's what we'll kind of take you through. But basically, sales tax free states, they're typically on the coasts, they're typically East Coast or West Coast. It's my understanding that that was to help drive some business there. But that's an important thing to understand, that there's a reason that they wanted to do that, to drive some business there, because those channels on the East and West side, those were harder to get. Say, like with a prep center, that's harder to get business on the coasts, because if you are a little bit more of an experienced seller, you understand the whole shipping channel issue with Amazon. If you're stuck out there on the West Coast and you have to split things up and get over to the East Coast, you're going to be incurring a lot of shipping. So having somebody in the middle of the country, I'm not saying this just because I'm from Michigan. We have people that we work with, other prep centers that experience this, that are in Texas and other things in the middle of the country, and they experience the same thing. We have very good shipping channels from the middle of the country. We can access east, west, and obviously middle very well. So that's one of the things that you want to factor into a sales tax-free state and issue. You also want to factor in, so for Michigan, one of the things that's kind of nuanced in our state is we are sales tax-free for grocery. To me, that's a tangential benefit that people have to understand, because our pricing, our services, our offerings are all based on being in a sales tax-free state. But if you're grocery heavy, then we're going to be able to serve you like a non-sales tax-free prep center, but you will be sales tax-free on that part. Jimmy also brought up a good point about the wholesale piece of it, because that's the other part that you have to kind of understand. I know of good sales tax-free prep centers. I've worked with some of them, sent recommendations to them. That's one thing that I always offer to people, because I do have people from coaching programs and other things call me and say, hey, I need you to give a recommendation. And they know that I'll give a recommendation based off what I think is best for that customer, and won't necessarily try to push them into working with Encore if I don't think that's best, because this is a solutions-based business. And so I can't ignore the best solution. If I think the best solution, hey, tell me, I had one guy that called me, wanted to work with us, and he was bordering a sales tax-free state. He was 30 minutes away from a prep center in that state, and he was heavy into RA. That guy needed to go to that prep center. I knew that prep center was good, and I told him, let me know if you have any problems, but you need to be going there. And maybe he'll move to us with wholesale. But wholesale, that's a good point, because once you move to any other facet of the Amazon business, basically other than arbitrage, if you're doing wholesale, private label, some of those things, that sales tax-free nature, the benefit of it kind of evaporates. So then you have to understand that those places that you were previously associated with, that they specialize in arbitrage, because that's the main part of their business. And so some of them don't even do wholesale, or if they do, their pricing is usually not as good, and they're not as specialized into it. Because one of the pitches that I've heard from sales tax-free prep centers is they'll give kind of like a simple formula, and they'll say, hey, you send us a $30 item, the sales tax would have been $1.50 on that item. We'll prep that item for $1.50. So we just prepped it for free for you. Mm-hmm. That's not really a complete picture, because you also could be incurring, depending on what state you're in and what state they're in, income tax that could come back and get you. And that's where we do pull in Cindy Smith of Ecom Accounting, because she's actually working on some videos for us for people that basically deal with different states. And hey, if you're in this state and then you're dealing with us in Michigan, here's what you would incur here. And here's what you would incur if you went to a West Coast prep center that's based in Oregon or what have you. And I think that information is very helpful, because you don't want to have hidden costs in your business. You want to know your costs from start to finish. And so that's one of them. I kind of talked about the the shipping placement, but that's important too, because you do want to evaluate when you're talking to these different prep centers what the shipping, the outbound shipping costs are. That's not something that we can control as a prep center, but it is location oriented. If you are in the middle of the country, it is traditionally less. I've done studies on this, and you can do studies based on changing your location in your account. So I'd rather have people see it for themselves, but we have saved people money close to what the difference was working with us versus a sales tax free prep center. We just can't really advertise that because we can't guarantee what the shipping price is going to be, but we do see that it's generally lower. So those are some of the things I've been filibustering for a while, so I want to let you back in, but this is something I'm passionate about and have been learning a lot about, because it's a common question. It is one of our biggest factors of competition, and I just want to make sure people that are informed. There's definitely times for it. If you're like that example I gave, if you're trying to do some retail arbitrage or you're only doing OA and that's what you want to stick with, and you got a good prep center, great. Then you can potentially save the money, but you got to be aware of those other things.
Absolutely. No, I think, as you said, a filibuster, it's because all of that information is important. I mean, it's not like you were saying a bunch of words that didn't matter. Like everything you said was important for sellers. For you mentioning my mom, just as a free plug here, Ecommerce Accounting, LLC.com. You can look her up and you can work with her if you'd like. I may have her on the channel here soon, actually, to talk about bookkeeping and taxes. But from the standpoint of picking a prep center, I think this is why it's so important to come back to the fundamental questions that we already laid out, which is, what's the pricing look like? What's their communication like? Can you trust them? Do they have good reviews? Maybe there's other customers you can talk to that can give you some information on working with a prep center, because it should not be solely based on where that prep center is located for sales tax free benefits, I would say, because as Ryan mentioned, there's other issues that can come up with that. The shipping could be much worse depending on where they're at. But the biggest one is within e-commerce, and again, I'm not an accountant either, but within e-commerce, whenever you're shipping products to a location, you have the risk or run the risk of having nexus, a sales or just a tax nexus in that state. Which that means that if you send any inventory to that state, it could trigger that you need to now file an income tax report from that state at the end of the year. But some, other states may have different requirements for what triggers that requirement. Also, their income tax rates could be different, and so many other things. So you need to take a look at kind of the bigger picture. Personally, talk to your accountant if I were you. Make sure that they understand kind of how this works. That's why e-commerce accounting and having an accountant that understands e-commerce and the implications there is so important. But as you're looking at a prep center, personally, my recommendation used to be with arbitrage, look at a sales tax free state, because it's going to save you 5-10% off the top. That's really not the full picture. So it's better to select a prep center based on all the other qualifications and criteria that we've talked about. And so I think you did a great job laying that out, because it's so important for sellers to understand and not be misled, because there are other tax implications that come up if you're using one state over another state. And if you've got a prep center in your state, that can actually help a little bit in some cases, because you're already filing income tax reports in your own state. So it just kind of depends on what you're looking for, as a seller. So I am curious of your thoughts on why should a seller use a prep center. So I've actually built a warehouse. I ran a warehouse for a long time, had 10 or 12 people. I started to build up a little prep center in my own warehouse at one point and decided that was not the business for me. But I'm curious of why should a seller use a prep center instead of prepping at home, and if there's a certain size that you recommend sellers be before they switch to a prep center.
That's a good question. We do get that one a lot. I think it depends for different people, but what we usually like to recommend to people is we do like people to prep their stuff first. We've had people that have just started right away where the first shipment goes into us and we handle it, but especially when you're dealing with potential issues or, hey, variations of the product or how things are kitted together, multi-packs, whatever it may be, if they know the products a little bit better and have actually physically put them together and put them in a box, then that's a lot different than wait a minute, this picture was a little different on Amazon, and then I purchased it somewhere else, and then I didn't know. And so we do like people to start that way. I think as long as you feel like you're getting the value for your time by doing that activity in your home, that's probably a good time to do it at your home. Now, there again, as people can probably already tell, I'm a little bit of a layered thinker with these things. So one of the things that we talk about when it's the idea of doing it at home, it's not only that opportunity cost of your time that Jimmy does cover with the time aspect. And hey, if you outsource a task, then you can do a $50 an hour task and outsource that item. It's also the idea that you're taking up space both physically and mentally with that activity. You're taking up space in your house, in your garage, you're renting a warehouse space, whatever that iteration is. You need to account for that too. It's why when we do our accounting and we account for our space at home, we get a deduction, because we're basically taking that space in our home and basically sectioning it off for our business, and so it's not as usable for other things, for our kids, for what a family, for whatever it is. And so that's an important piece to understand, like, hey, what am I buying back? I always advise people to kind of do a bit of an equation and say, basically, whatever I spend on the prep materials, that's included in whatever the prep center is actually going to charge you, and then along with the space. And then you can basically, and I can send this to people, but basically you can work out an equation where you can get down to the fact of what you're paying yourself per hour. And I think that's clear. I think that's what you want to see as a seller, and see if that's acceptable, that you're paying yourself $5 an hour to prep your items. That's probably not acceptable. You can do something with your time that's going to net you a lot more than $5 an hour. You're not even making minimum wage at that point, and we're all in this business to make more than minimum wage. So that would be a key there. And then I'm obviously at a prep center, so I'm going to encourage people to go to a prep center because I can see the benefits of it. But I really do see it from the standpoint of, this is something that you can outsource, gain a partner, because that's one thing that I always say about our business is we're a partnership. We're not just outsourcing the tape and the box. We like to consult with our clients. We like to help them get over pitfalls. We like to go above and beyond a traditional prep center. So you're partnering up with a business, you're adding another help you improve your business, and then you're taking the time on the things that can grow your business, because doing that and taking your valuable time and doing it at your home, there's a limit to that, I think. So once you get to the point where you can say, hey, I can take 10 hours back by sending this to a prep center, and I'm going to use 5 of that for personal time, but I'm going to use 5 of that for sourcing. I think even in that equation, it works out pretty well, that you're going to send in more products and then make that money back that you're going to pay us to prep it. So that's kind of how we normally couch it with people.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. And I think I always get this question too of, all right, I've already been prepping some products. If I move to a prep center though, 40% of my products aren't going to be profitable anymore because I'm going to have to spend this much and it's just not worth it. So I usually recommend, I'm curious if you would have this same recommendation, is if you are currently prepping your products and you want to move to a prep center, keep the ones at home that you have to prep to keep that profitability up, to keep your sales up, but get rid of the other ones and start that slow process of building towards being fully outsourced to a prep center handling your prep work. Would you agree with that, or do you have any different opinion?
No, I like that opinion. I think that's an important point to talk about, kind of those lower margin items. I think this is more in your bailiwick than mine, but I think the advice would be, if the margins are that thin, where adding in $1 to $1.50 is killing the margin, then that's probably not a long-term product for you. That's probably trending the wrong way. And how much are you actually making on that in the end, if you're factoring in all your true costs? And then again, back to the hourly equation, how much is that product actually helping you? If it's good for sell-through rate and other factors for your Amazon store, that's one thing. But yeah, we usually try to softly encourage people to find products that, hey, use those same methods. You were able to find that product and it was profitable, and maybe at one time it was more profitable. But if you're already getting to the fact that it's a loss when you outsource it to a prep center, then it's probably headed towards a loss, and then you can call that bottom end of your catalog and then add in, because that's always what you want to be doing. You want to be adding in 2 for every 1 you lose kind of thing. And so then you can trim some of that fat that inevitably happens at the bottom of the catalog.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an important distinction. That's one reason I say kind of start stair stepping out of doing your own prep if you want to get to a prep center, because it is eventually those products are probably going to fizzle. And unless it is something that has a really high sell-through rate and you can just sticker them really quickly and just send them off and it helps with your Amazon account. But ultimately, I think that would be helpful. Now, I am curious, Ryan, I've got a couple more questions. I know we're getting closer on time here, but the first question that I have for you is with arbitrage specifically. A big issue for sellers is orders getting canceled because they're sending it to a prep center. Do you have any recommendations, or have you seen that be a problem with your clients? And if you have, what are your recommendations for people to kind of get around some of those cancellations?
That's a good one. We've been getting that question more lately, and I have to say, this isn't really a brag, because I don't know really why this is, but we've never had an issue with that at our prep center. I think some of it is the location that we're in, and the commercial space that we're in. It's not necessarily looking like what they're looking at as a prep center, because I think part of that, I think I'm going to go back to the offerings with this question, because when something is very clearly a prep center, then that's easily targeted by some of these organizations that don't want to send to prep centers and cancel orders as a result. If you notice, I don't know if we mentioned it a lot in the conversation at the beginning, we did, but our name is Encore Business Group. We don't have prep or ship in our title. I think that changes a lot of things for us, because if you're sending something where the address is Jimmy's Prep and Ship, then that's something where that's a little bit more obvious what's happening there. We have very layered warehousing operations, so the idea that they would be sending it there might not indicate a pure prep center kind of thing. So that's part of it. We have toyed with the idea of, okay, do we need to work through, say, a personal address? Like I've even offered that to clients before, where volume wise, if they, I live in a very safe neighborhood, it's easy to deliver things to my place. I work from home part of the time, things like that. There can be workarounds that we've discussed with customers when they've asked that during the onboarding process. But I'm thankful to say that we really haven't had that. But I would look at that piece of it. I think the 2 pieces that you want to look at is how it's named, how the place is named, and then how many kind of red flags that puts up, and also the location on a map, because I think that's a lot of what happens, because we've had that with even the reverse benefit. Because in arbitrage, this is a problem. In wholesale, as you know, you do a decent amount of wholesale. In wholesale, that's a strength, that you have a presence at a warehouse, that you go from, oh yeah, I live in a flat in Central Park in New York City. Clearly, I'm not doing a lot of volume out of there. I don't have lift gate access. I don't have those types of things. But, oh no, I'm sending it through this warehouse. Oh, this is an 18,000 square foot warehouse that can handle this volume. So that can be a benefit for the arbitrage side. I think having the variety of not having prep specifically in the name has probably benefited us. And then what the actual physical location looks like on a map, if you looked it up on Google Maps. I think we kind of toe the line between, we look okay enough on the arbitrage side, but we do have an official footprint that looks good on Google as far as a warehousing space, if wholesalers or different larger shippers needed to do business with us.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I know sometimes people, and I'm not making this recommendation, I don't know the legal ramifications of this, but sometimes people will change their billing address on their credit card to be the same as their shipping address for their prep center, if that's allowed by the prep center, I don't know. But they'll do that so that way the billing and the shipping address matches instead of being different. I've seen that be a workaround for some people. Sometimes it's because of VPNs and wherever you're located. If you're somebody in like, the UK and you're doing Amazon arbitrage on the US, then it may just be that your IP address is in a different country, and so orders are getting canceled because it's going to a different location than what your IP address shows. So there's some recommendations there. If anybody has questions on that, maybe I make another YouTube video on it with somebody else that does this more regularly, but you can also post those questions in the comments. Now, my other question for you, Ryan, to kind of wrap up the conversation, at least for today, we may have more of these, but is for people that are doing e-commerce. We talked a little bit earlier about the opportunities kind of weaving together, and hey, you're doing Amazon, and other opportunities can come up. But for people that may be interested in building a prep center, maybe they like the prep side and they just want to build that out more. What are some of your pieces of advice that you'd have for anybody looking to get started at building a prep center, even if it's just small, out of their house or something like that?
Yeah, we like doing this. We've actually helped some folks kind of build this in their own space, and there may be some future content, as Jimmy talked about, regarding this. But I am passionate about that because I think a lot of people, again, back to the cake candlelight thing, I think a lot of people would say, well, you're building a competitor there. No, that's not really how we look at it. We like being advisors in this space and helping people, build the business of their dreams. And if part of their dreams involve a prep center, we're happy to do that. So yeah, there are people that really do like the prep side of things. I have had potential clients that have come up to us and said, hey, we want to do this and yada yada. And then they tell me about their situation. They clearly have a passion for it. And I say, you know what? I think you should do this more the other way, where you build up your space. You already seem to have a good space. Maybe you got extra room in a garage. You've got a 3-stall garage that the one stall is just purely dedicated to your Amazon space. That this is may come off as funny to some people, but whenever people tell me they have younger family members, like kids that end up being their preppers, that's usually a pretty conducive situation. You're teaching your kids business, and then you get them a little bit of the profit, but then you're getting pretty cheap labor and teaching them something at the same time,
Yes.
and then keeping that operation in your house. So that's usually where I see that conducive nature. But if you are in a place, because we brought it up earlier, like being across from major metropolitan areas, and you're in a tax-free state, and people in your area that they're 30 minutes away, they're across the border, you maybe that's what I would kind of suggest, because networking is so key in this business. I would suggest getting a little bit of a network going with local sellers in your area. It's always good to learn from local sellers. And if you're wanting to do this with the prep center side, then you've built in a little bit of of potential customer base there. And you can say, hey, we've got an operation going. We're only 30 minutes away from you. We can drop off your products. And maybe there's even an angle to do the sourcing for them. I think that's one of the biggest opportunities in this industry as a whole. If you are in a hotbed for sourcing, I know of one prep center that does this, but if you're in a hotbed for sourcing and you can have people to go out and source the products, then you might be able to do this as a smaller operation. If you're already going to a lot of those same stores and you're a trustworthy seller and you can keep those lines separate, because it's always very important as a prep center. That's another question we get a lot, is do you sell on Amazon? Is there any issues with, seeing our products? We have no, to me, ethically and morally and integrity wise, we have no issues with that. But it is an important thing to make sure that you are on the up and up with your prep center. But as long as you are, if you've got your own space where you really have locked down that operation and you've got good access to somewhat cost conducive labor, whether it's family members. I know some people that run prep centers that basically have like maybe single that parents that have a little bit of occupy their time while their kids are at school. That's sometimes a good strategy. But if you can kind of set up a few of those things and you have a good space for it, I think that's when you have the makings for a prep center that can serve the needs of your area. And then you're changing your cost basis big time. All those things that I said about, hey, you're taking up your space, you're taking up your time. Well, if you're making that money back by adding some revenue in, another revenue stream, that's such a big one for Jimmy in this community, the streams of income, that's another revenue stream for you that you just prep for an extra hour, say that day. You have everything set up, you've already got everything going, and now you add in one prep customer where you're doing an extra hour a day, then you're making back your time and your energy and your costs by doing that, and then serving your community as well, which is always of value. So like I said, we're working on some content in that area, but if people have questions about that or any of the other things, I'm happy to have them reach out to me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another way to look at it too is if you are prepping yourself and you're starting to want to outsource to other people, it's a lot easier to outsource to other people if you also have some extra work for them, right? So instead of them coming in to do 2 hours a day of prep for your own business, if you're like, hey, you're going to work on our business for 2 hours a day, but then we've got some other clients for another 2 to 3 hours a day, that can help somebody actually have close to full-time wage or full-time if you get it big enough. And that was actually one reason that I started doing some prep center stuff years ago, is there was just extra time that we wanted to fill for the employees. And it went well for a little while. It just started to distract once we got into Q4. So it was something that I liked doing the Amazon selling more than the prep center stuff. So we ended up moving away from it, but it's a great model for people that like the prep and want to build into it. I do have a bunch of links. I know we've talked about a lot of stuff on this call today, Ryan, so I'll put all of the links to everything. Whether you need prep supplies, whether you want to talk to Ryan and his team about doing prep and ship, or you're interested in starting your own prep center, all those links will be in the description. For the prep center specifically, the link is askjimmysmith.com/prep network. So we'll make sure to put that in the link below. It'll take you to the prep center network. And then there's an option if you are interested in opening a prep center, you can just let people know and get some details for that. And then Ryan and Jim Cockrum and or myself will be reaching out to you to let you know about opportunities for content on building your own prep center. But I've already gone through and given the links to talk to Ryan and his team. If you're interested in that, you go to askjimmysmith.com/encore. That's ENCORE. And you can connect with them. They work on my prep products and they work on so many other people in the Business Building Legends community. And by the way, if you're in the Legends community, they also have an exclusive discount for members in there. So I appreciate that, Ryan. It's always a huge help for sellers that are paying to be in that membership, that community to get the discount as well. So Ryan, is there anything else you'd like to cover before we close it out today, or feel like we covered everything?
I think we did a pretty good job. I'm always open to other questions and coming back on, but I appreciate you
Awesome.
having me on and appreciate your partnership and the partnership with Legends and all the great content that you produce. So
Thank you.
I'm glad that we could make some content together, and I'm looking forward to more chances to partner in the future and serve your community and any community that needs it here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, keep doing a great job and we'll keep having you on. That's the whole point, right? We always try to highlight people that are doing a great job. So I appreciate you, Ryan, and everything that you do for the community, your heart behind serving people and serving your clients. And I'm excited to get this one out there to everybody that's interested in Prep Center stuff. So thank you, everybody. If you have any questions, post them down in the comments below. I'll try to respond to as many as I can, unless there's something I can't respond to, in which case I'll reach out to Ryan. But yeah, hope this helped you and blessed you, and we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks so much. Hey, thank you so much for checking out this video interview with Ryan Walsh from Encore Business Group. Their prep center has completely changed how I operate and has been the best prep center experience I've ever had over 10 years of selling on Amazon. So if you're interested in checking them out, head over to askjimmysmith.com/encore, and you're going to be able to talk with their team and see if it's a right fit, see their pricing model, and so many other things. If you're in the Business Building Legends community, you actually get a discount to their prep center services. So be sure to check that out in our exclusive Legends discounts section of the platform. If you have any questions for Ryan or for myself, please post them in the comments section down below. We're here to help in any way that we can. I hope this video helped you and blessed you, and that you have a great rest of your day and a blessed rest of your week.